What we have used so far in QuickBooks, instead of using general journal entries, is that we've gone through and we recorded a deposit, and we did that for our $80,000 check that we got from the owners as an investment. We also went through and wrote a check, okay, and we wrote a check when we paid our rent. And again, remember our rent was a little bit different because instead of paying for 1 month, what did they pay? A whole year. So instead of it being rent expense, they actually went through and called it prepaid rent because we paid for a whole year, very similar to insurance. And that was transaction number 4. I can't remember.
Yeah, we're in the middle of one, and you said we go back and take
Oh, I think we had to put the check number in. Okay. And the other thing we had to do is we had to do that goodwill entry for that one owner that wasn't putting any money into the business, but their knowledge and their skill, they valued at $20,000. And to do that one, we went through and actually did a general journal entry. So we've kind of used all different parts of QuickBooks this way. And I'm going to go through and continue to show you some of these tips here because it's very similar to what we're going to be learning when we get back to Appley and the fact that we are going to be using something called special journals to keep track of different things. And what we have here is we know if we want to do one part of accounting work, we're going to go to a certain part in QuickBooks. Okay, so let's take a look at our check that we were writing yesterday. Okay, so I went to write check, and then I went to previous. Okay, on the very top up here, because by default it should have gone to check 2. So I'm going to go here to previous. Did you find? Are you able to get where I'm at? And the check should be written to the order of Dan and D Properties, and we had to type that in, and then we had to add that as a new vendor. Remember how we did that right at the end of the hour yesterday? Now, what we didn't do is we didn't actually get the correct check number, because what check number comes up? 1. And what check number should we be using? Nope. Nope. Look on the top of page 17. Yep. So we need to, where it says check number 1, we're going to put in 1101. Do you see where you can just type right over that? Because that's a check number. Top of page 17, accounting tip. It tells us what check number we're starting with. Okay, so I'm not randomly making up a number.
I was looking at the invoice number.
Oh, no, the invoice is the bill we got, and the check number is what we're going to write with. So, and we can see that we have our date is set to January 12th. I think I forgot to change that yesterday. And check number 1101, and then you can go ahead and just click on Save and Close, and it's going to say you changed the transaction. Do you want to record it? You say, by yes. Oh. Now, did it go through and write another check, or did we just modify the check? Modified it. Okay. So that was transaction number 4. Let's take a look at transaction number 5. On page 18. Pay the invoice $100 for hooking up electricity at the studio. The invoice includes a $50 connection fee and a $50 deposit. The invoice is accompanied by a note to the accountant to write a check to the local electric company for $2,400. The band thinks this amount will cover the expense for the entire year. So, it tells us right here we need to debit prepaid expenses for $2,350 and prepaid deposits $450. What do we need to do? Are we receiving money or are we paying money? So look in the Post-it note in the lower left-hand corner. Do you see it says write a check to? So where do we have to go in QuickBooks? Write checks. Okay. Now, we can change the check number right away, because this should be 1102. And who is the check going to be made payable to? Local Electric Inc. You have to type it in because it's not going to be there from the drop-down list. And then when you go to click off of it, it's going to say, it's not in the name list. You can automatically add it, and you're going to click it as a quick add. And when you click on it as a quick add, you're going to add it as a vendor. Okay. Now, on the very bottom is where we need to go through and categorize this. And I want to get this in there. So, if we go to expenses, even though we're not really using expense, you have your whole chart of accounts on the bottom. Do you see that? So it tells us that we need to debit prepaid expenses for how much? $2,350. And then we need to also debit prepaid deposit for $50. And notice what happens when I fill it in on the bottom part of this check. What does it do to the actual check on the top? It fills out the amount. So that is why what I did is I filled in the check number, I filled in the amount of who it's being paid to. I should check the date, which is still, it should be the 12th. It switched to today's date of the 15th. So the date of the check should be January 12th. And if I were to add another amount on the bottom, what would it do to the total amount of the check? It would add it, but do we need to actually do that? What else should I add to this? Something in the memo. What should we put in? Well, I'm not going to put the check number because the check number is actually up on the very top. It's not a deposit. We need to put something in the memo. So what? Because the check number is pre-printed on the top, what I can do is I can type in transaction 5. And because I didn't have that typed in before I typed in the second one, I have to put it in there. So we have transaction 5 in there, and then what do I need to do? Save and...
You don't put anything in the memo line for the chat?
No, it'll fill in from everything there. Now, transaction number 6, also dated January 12th. It says, pay the invoice $100 to the telephone contract for the studio. The invoice includes a $50 connection fee and a $50 deposit. A note to the accountant accompanies this invoice. It says, write the check for $1,200 to cover what the band thinks will be the expense for the entire year. Debit prepaid expenses for $1,150 and prepaid deposits for $50. I think you know how to do this, right? Because we just did that. Your check number, is it automatically filled in right now as 1103? Okay. The date, is it today's date?
Yep.
Okay. So we're going to make the check payable to Ramez Telephone. And then quick add as a vendor. And then I am going to debit prepaid expenses for $1,150. I'm going to put the memo line in right away, and this is going to be transaction 6, because when I go to the next line, it will fill it in for me. Also, prepaid deposit for $50. It didn't type in transaction 6. I'll type it in. Okay, so I wrote that check out for our telephone bill. So what you are noticing for creating the band is they're actually going through and paying a lot of the things that people pay monthly. They're trying to estimate and pay it already at the beginning of the year so they know that they have cash to cover it. So on January 12th, transaction number 7, it says pay the invoice from an office furniture store for the purchase of office furniture that will be used by the band. So we have to pay this. Where do we need to go? What do we need to do? Write a check. Yes, businesses do write a lot of checks. So, who are we making the check out to? Bell's office furniture. Check numbers already filled in as 1104. The date is still going to say January 12th. Now on the bottom, you're going to quick add Bell's as a vendor. On the account, what are we actually buying? Okay, not supplies. Office furniture. And you will see that there actually is an account that says office furniture. So we're going to use office furniture. And how much office furniture did we get? 2,400. Now, why is it important that I keep track of office furniture different than office supplies? Yeah, for example, am I going to need to throw this chair away that I'm sitting on at the end of the month? Is it used up? No, so furniture is going to be an asset that stays around, kind of like computers. So, and they're just going through and tracking it as office furniture instead of office supplies. Okay. So you should have 2,400 and the date of the 12th. You can go ahead and click on Save and Close. Oh, forgot the memo. Yes. Grassel's slacking. Transaction 7. Good call, people. Way to keep me on my toes. Page 21, Transaction 8. Pay the invoice for computer equipment and office supplies. Debit the amount and applicable sales tax for computer, cable, surge processors, and printer for computer equipment debit, and the amount of the applicable sales tax for the other items to supplies expense. Okay, so what do we have to do? We are going to need to write a check. But first of all, when we go to write this check, we're going to have to go through and configure some things. We're going to write the check to Jefferson. Oh, my hands were not on home row. Jefferson Office Supply. Quick add as a vendor. Now, down here in the bottom, I have to go through and I have to figure out where my items are going towards. So this is what I am going to do, is I'm going to use Excel. Why? Because I'm going to be able to show you the amount. So the first thing I have is discs, and they're for 25, correct? What's my next item on there? CDRs. And how much is the CDRs? $24.95. So I'm going to go through.
Do we need to do this? Or
I would, because you're going to need to do this a little bit later. Nothing you need to turn in to me. Yeah, so you know how to do this on another one. So I'm opening Excel, and I'm just really going through and putting in the information. And I'll show you why I'm doing it in Excel. I know some of you are still typing this in Excel, but I want to show you the reason why. Okay, we know the invoice on page 21 is for $5,000, but $5,000 is not going into one account. Okay, what we need to do is we have to go through and break this between two different accounts. We are either going to be putting it into supplies expense, or going through and putting it into computer equipment. So they are going through and actually using a different model for doing supplies. They're putting it into an expense, and they're going to see what's left over at the end of the year and putting it back into the asset. So it's a little bit different model, but we can deal with it. So, disc, supplies expense or computer? Yes. I'm going to put SE for supplies expense, shortcut. CDs. Supplies expense, pens?
Supplies.
Legal pads? Envelopes?
Supplies.
Stapler?
Supplies.
Paper?
Supplies.
Notepads?
Supplies.
Okay.
Computer.
Now, notebook computer is going to be computer equipment. Okay, that was the other code they gave us. So I'm going to put it in as CE.
Computer.
USB cable, they told me in the directions to put it in computer equipment. Surge strip, they also told me to put in computer equipment, and the printer. So do you see how we kind of have, for me, 9 and up are going to be supplies expense, and 10 to 13 are going to be other ones. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to go through and right click, and I'm going to insert a blank row right here. Okay, so then what I am going to do, all I did is right clicked on 10, wherever you need to, it doesn't matter. Right click and I insert it, and I can put another one in here, it doesn't matter. I'm just putting a break between them. So what I need to do here is I actually need to add it up. And how many of you know how to do formulas in Excel? Sorry, Ashley. Okay, you used to? So what I'm going to do is I really want to add things up. Mathematically, when you want to add things up, what do you say? Sum. So I'm going to do equals and the word sum. Then I'm going to do a left parenthesis, and I'm really going to highlight everything I want to add up. And that just gave me the total for my supplies. Now, I'm not really done yet, because what else do I need to do? No, tax. Okay, so this is the total of the product, but I also need to have my sales tax. What is my sales tax? 6.25%. So, what would I need to do to multiply this by to get my total? Not 0.0625. If I do that, that would only give me my sales tax. Now, if I multiply it by 1.0625, it'll take the amount of my product times my sales tax plus my product back into it. Does that make sense? A little bit of advanced math. We're going to use some algebra today. So I'm going to multiply this by 1.0625, which is the amount of our sales tax back in. And then when I hit enter, this now is all of this plus my sales tax. Now I'm going to do the same thing here for my computer equipment. So I'm going to do equals and sum, left parenthesis, add all of this up. Now this is just the value of my product, and what do I need to do? I need to times that times 1.0625. Okay, now how am I going to double check that everything comes out right? I need to add these two totals. So I'm going to do equals this plus this one. And what should it equal? How come? Sales tax. It's going to be rounding it a little bit different. So we're going to have to go through and calculate it just a little bit differently. So what we are going to need to do is actually take our total sales tax. And what is our total sales tax? Do you see it on there?
Like the amount of it?
Yep. You see where the amount is on there? So what I have now is just the amount of the product. So I'm going to put over here the amount of the sales tax. So I'm going to go through and do this times 0.0625, right? 0.0625. Try it differently. Forgot my decimal. So when I go through and do that, you'll notice that I have 290 versus how much am I off by? Basically $4. Would you agree? So we have to do a little bit of rounding, and I got to figure out which way they rounded it. Let me just look it up which way they rounded it. Because when you have a larger number and multiply it, you get different rounding than you do when you...
I have a question. Do you use your calculator when it comes out or no?
Well, this is exactly using a calculator. So you would have the same thing would happen on a calculator. I'm just doing it in Excel to make our lives just a little bit easier. So you can see the math instead of me trying to explain what I'm doing on my calculator. Hang on, I gotta look up another spot. So how am I going to use this? That's the important question. How am I going to use this? I need to go in and put in my account to supplies expense. Supplies expense is going to be $183.76. And then my computer equipment is going to be $4,816.24. How did I get those numbers? Right here. Both of those added together give me my $5,000. I did not want to just give you that number. Why? You're going to have other ones where you need to go through and know how to do this. You can't just copy your neighbors.
You just put transaction in?
Yes. The amount of the check should be for $5,000. That is all the transactions for creating the band for January, by the way. Because again, this account is just kind of working part-time. So we're going to be going through our next transactions are going to be going through and doing February's. You have sales expense and computer equipment, SE and CE.